Hi, friends. Welcome to Race to Rise podcast, a place where we discuss bite sized wisdom nuggets with easy to follow practices to live a better life. I am your host, Mital Patel, a parenting junkie, Ayurveda enthusiast, and an advocate of conscious living. One of the biggest challenge us parents face on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis, is how to make our kids listen. And when we say that we want to make our kids listen to us, what we mean is we want them to comply with whatever guidance or recommendations or things that needs to get done on, from a school level to activity levels to, health wise, whatever that is, right? And so that's what I really want to talk about today, that when we say that we want our kids to listen, we mean that we want our kids to comply with our request or recommendation. And it's not just with our kids, but it's with any relationship. We all want other people to comply with our request or, the expectations. And just because I blurred out the word expectations so early, I didn't want it to, but let's go there. Expectations. How do you define expectations? So I actually Googled expectation, and the first definition that comes is expectation means a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. Or it can be defined as expectation is a belief that someone will or should achieve something. And I really like the second one. That's what actually the expectation means. And that's what we have with our kids. Like we want our, we have all these expectations and we think or we want our kids to fulfill our expectations and meet, our agenda. And so that's what we mean, a belief that someone will or should achieve something. That's what expectation means, right? And we all there are two types of expectations. Outer expectations, such as like deadlines, a request from, or demand, I shall say, a demand from a growing little being in your life, or, following an agenda or a plan, and inner expectations, such as like a desire to keep up with our New Year's resolution just because it's coming up, or like, start and stick with a habit that we really think is healthy for us, right? Like a desire, something that we want to do from internally. And how someone responds to these inner and outer expectations is what determines our behavior or, our life in general. And so, how cool would it be to know that how others respond to your expectations? It would be wonderful, right? If you knew that this is how your kids are going to follow the plan or your quote unquote expectations or agenda list, life would be so much easier. In short, everyone will comply with each other. So it would be really wonderful to understand and know that how others respond to the expectations, so that way we have better understanding how can we help them be more effective. And that's what we want in our parent-child relationship specifically, right? We want to be effective in our communication with our kids, and at the same time we want to ensure that our kids, are complying with the life's, what's good for them in general. Like we want them to follow the healthy habits. We want them to eat, healthy food, and we want them to make healthy choices. But of course, if we force them, it's not going to happen. So we want to facilitate the environment because I firmly believe that the growth is in facilitation and not the force, right? So when we force something, it doesn't work because then they are doing it out of fear or they're just doing it to do it and just to make us happy. And so instead, we want to ensure that we are facilitating the growth where the child is complying with the request because they want to and they see the benefit and they see that this will make a difference. And we want to empower them to make the choices, again, similar choices in their life. So today I want to share this phenomenal concept that I learned from this book called The Four Tendencies. I read this book last year. I want to say last year or in 2020, I don't remember. But of course I forgot and it didn't sit well with me at that time until recently when one of my coaches just brought this out that this is why because I was struggling with a challenge, like not a challenge actually. I was struggling with something and I consulted her and I reached out to her that I need a coaching session and then during the conversation she just recommended like she was like, "Oh, by the way, have you read this book?" I was like, "Yeah, I read this book." And she's like, "So what, whatever." From our conversation, I was like, "Oh my god, this makes a whole lot of sense." And then I started practicing with my kids and such a game changer. I mean, you must know by now that game changer is my favorite word. And so, anyway, so this book, it's it shares this beautiful personality framework. And I'm such a nerd in self discovery and learning about ourselves and learning about my kids' personality. So I can facilitate the growth environment for them and I can, guide them and help them and empower them to making a better choice and best choice for them. So the author, Gretchen Rubin, shares this amazing, phenomenal personality framework called the Four Tendencies, and she shares she shares how humans are divided in this four distinct types, and there are types, and of course she doesn't mean to put us in into the box. And these four types also, like there are four types, and these four categories or types, whatever you want to call it, are inherently they are not inherently bad or meant to make us feel like, we're boxed in or we're doomed to lifelong problems. They're just, it's just meant as they're meant as a tool for us to gain insights into our nature and the nature of, the people that we work with, the people we want to collaborate with, the people who we travel with, for example, our kids and our partner, our coworkers, so that we can be more confident, productive, efficient, and effective individual. So today I want to share this four tendency framework with you and I will actually also share a link in our bio to take a quiz and you can identify, what is your tendency and then work through it. Like, okay, what can you do to be more productive, more confident, more efficient, and effective individual? And how can you help your child be more confident, productive, effective, and efficient being at the same time? So here we go. So, four types, and these each of the four tendencies or types, whatever we're gonna call it tendency. So each of these four tendencies deal with expectations differently. So number one is called an upholder. Upholders are the ones who meets outer expectations and inner expectations. These are the people who has no trouble getting to work on time, getting a full 8 hours of sleep, because they just respond really well to both the expectations placed on them by the other people and the expectations they place on themselves. They get their work done efficiently and make time for themselves. So these are kind of like ideal people. And, they find great satisfaction in meeting expectations and following rules, which means that these people are the kind that find it gratifying and liberating to have a disciplined line. In fact, a good motto for these upholders is discipline brings freedom. And so this tendency doesn't actually come without, it challenges because, of course, everyone has challenges. And so they are, of course, so ready to follow the rules that they, sometimes neglect to ask questions and end up blindly adhering to rules and directions that are harmful or just plain wrong. So these are also the kind of people who are most likely to be snitch and the least likely to embrace the change. So in short, upholders are reliable people who, who you can rely on because they will meet your expectations and they will also take care of themselves. But like everyone else, they do face challenges, like experiencing what's known as tightening, which is opposite of how others, would experience like the flow. And so, however, yes, they can start a new habit, for example, but over time, it gets tightened and becomes, stronger and more controlling over their life. So that's their biggest struggle. So if you or your child or your partner is an upholder, if you're trying to work with them, the best piece of advice is to make sure you give clear and precise instructions. So whether it's for you, for your partner, for your child, and if you want to have, meet be compliant with each other and meet everyone's, just have harmony in life, then make sure that you give clear and precise instructions, because once they have a clear understanding of the priorities and what's expected of them, upholders can then be left to take care of the business. And they're generally like, self-starters, so they don't require like micromanagement and they can get their things done. However, they can have trouble delegating duties and adjusting to changes in routine. So if you see like work piling up or things not getting done, then you might want to check in to see if they need help and just offer the help. So this is how you work with upholders. Number 2 tendency is a questioner. A questioner who meets their inner expectations but resists outer expectations. Yes, questioners are the ones who are resistant to meeting the needs of others, and their nature can be both a benefit and a hindrance. So for example, if you have something that you want to get it done by a questioner, if you go to them, the response that you might get is, I'm willing to help you out, but you have to convince me why it's worth my time. Does that sound like, do you know anyone like that? And this is actually a typical attitude of this tendency, the questioner. And so the questioners do a really fine job of setting and meeting their own expectations. But yeah, they have this, they feel a strong desire to question everything that other people want them to do. And so the best way to describe them is like, the questioner would say that I do what makes sense, even if it means ignoring rules or other people's expectations. Unlike upholders, because a questioner isn't going to just follow your instructions just because you are the boss or, you are the parent or you're the one who is telling them to do. Even if it's a procedure people have been following for years, they're just not going to follow right away because they want to know why you made this rule or why you need this to be done. So whether or not it's fair. So they're just going to question, and it can be, exhausting to deal with them at times. But their nature is what makes them tremendously valuable because they meet their inner expectations and they make you question things and not just blindly follow, other people's requirements or requests. And so, like, just because they ask you questions, it of course makes you think and not blindly follow the rules or, expectations. But their nature can also be a hindrance when it comes to, when it results in the analysis paralysis. Because the main reason for questions is to make sure the right decisions are being made. But if we get stuck in the analysis paralysis, then of course it might, overwhelm us and we might not be able to make the choice that we were really looking into. So the way we can work with questioners is, we need to give them clear justification if you want them to meet, your expectations. Because they don't just like being told what to do or comply with your request. They're just not going to do it. So the key to dealing with a questioner is to be precise with your reasoning and justification when you want to give them a task. I mean, you might have already experienced it when, a kid who's constantly following up with every answers and they'll just say, "But why? But why?" Right? So you already have experiences. So ensure to do the quiz. And if you have a little quiz, little kids, then you have to make the choices for them and find out what their personality is. What I've noticed though that it works if you have, if you have children who are like above 10 because they can choose their answers for them, or because I tried it with my 12-year-old and that's how I'm working with. So this is more for like, the preteen age and, teenager and how we can work with our partners and understanding our little ones might be difficult and we might not come across that this is the right tendency because at that point it might just work as an assumption because of course the kids can't answer you. You can try asking them question in a kid language and see if you can find an answer, but I tend to know that it works best when the child is doing the quiz themselves. Our third tendency is obligers. These people, like, they meet outer expectations with no problem, but they resist inner expectations. Yes, they struggle to meet their own expectations. But there's a solution. This can be solved by manufacturing outside accountabilities. Yes, we'll talk more about it. But do you know someone who always puts others ahead of themselves? And, just are like people pleasers. That's what we call them because these are the people who excels at meeting outside expectations and they just fail to meet their desires. And that's just how they're built. But again, yes, we have solution, right? So, for example, some of the everyday tasks an obliger will have trouble with are like exercising, taking, doing something for themselves, doing much of anything that requires, self motivation kind of a thing. That's where they struggle. But again, they are quite effective at meeting the demands of others. And in fact, the research says that obligers are the largest of the four groups. They are the dependable rocks of our society. And so even though they struggle mightily to give themselves the same respect that they give others, this is just how our society is built, right? And so, if any of these sounds familiar to you, you may also be familiar with people telling you or, someone you know that you simply need to be more selfish. And you may also feel that, a sense of shame at needing to come up with these outside sources of accountability because that's where we're going to go. Because these are the group of people, the obligers, they thrive by the sources of, accountability in order for them to take care of self. So obligers may be the toughest category to be in. And that's why they might get most out of understanding these four tendencies. And, they might get more out of this because this will actually guide them that this is how it works. This is how, it's just hard for me to meet my inner expectations. So I'm just going to, invest in accountability partners. I'm just going to ask for help. That's the most important thing that they can do. And they can actually get, a lot of frustrations and they can get, they can snap out of the things just for, people taking them for granted or treating them unfairly or, you know, feeling shamed with accusation of being lazy or pathetic. And so that's why it's just important to work with obligers and, provide that accountability and support them. And I can share this because my husband is an obliger. He falls into that obliger tendency. And my older child he also falls into obliger tendency in that group. And so I know how hard it is for them to meet their inner expectations. Even if they want to exercise, they're not able to because that's just how they're built in. They have, acquired the people pleasing tendencies and they think it's selfish to do the work, and I mean, they just can't, they're just not able to do it. And so that's why accountability works best. And I know it from the firsthand experience when I am the accountability partner for my husband and my son, and they thrive. That's where they thrive. So it's just, when we understand these tendencies, we can create the environment for our partner, for our child, for, our coworkers, and we can support each other and help each other out. The next category, the next tendency, number 4, is drum roll, because this is the category where I fall in. It's called rebels. Rebels are the group of people who resist outer expectations and they resist inner expectations. So, rebels resist meeting any expectations or being bossed around. Period. We don't like to be told what needs to be done, and we don't want to do what we want to do. Yeah, it's weird. So, anyways, this is the category. Like, not that many people fall into this category. This is the smallest group of the society. But the motto for these people is, you can't make me, and neither can I. Yeah, freedom. We're like a freedom birds. I fall into this, so I know how it feels. And it just feels so right. I felt so heard, seen, and understood when I read about this particular tendency. I was like, yeah, that's just me. Because not only it's just inner thing, and not only we're having a hard time meeting your, outer expectations, but we have a hard time meeting our inner expectations. And for us, it's all about individuality. And we want everything that, to be a reflection of our unique self. And so anything that could be considered as an expectation gets rejected. Period. We're not looking at it, we're not considering, we're just not even going to think about it. And so if this sounds like rather extreme, because sometimes it might seem like, this is just extreme, keep in mind that this is the smallest group of all 4 tendency. And one of the biggest thing that I learned as a rebel, that we love proving people wrong. And that is so true. So rebels thrive, if you have rebel in life, they thrive in challenges. So you cannot just tell them that this needs to be done, you have to do this, this is your deadline, because guess what? It's not getting done. And even if they want to do it internally, it's not getting done. And it just gets frustrating for themselves. And it doesn't serve anyone, like the surroundings or themselves. But thankfully, there are ways they can meet their own expectations at least, and they can also meet expectations, outer expectations. It's just you need to learn how to get things done by them. Because just like obligers, rebels also have this trouble of taking care of themselves and meeting their inner expectations. For them, what works is challenge. Like, even if a rebel wants to exercise and, eat healthy food, they just get frustrated with their inability to, we just have this, we just cannot stick to, the same routine or do what's good for us. That's just how it's just built in. So it just takes a little more efforts in facilitating the environment. So, for example, if you're a rebel, or if you know someone who's a rebel and who's having trouble staying with the eating habit, for example, because I have this gut health problem, and I'm having a hard time staying, following the routines and the eating habits. What we need to do is what we can do is making like fitness, geeking into the fitness or the cooking, and making that as a central part of our identity, attaching that to our identity, or that's what helps us, because at that point we think this is a challenge, because it becomes challenging for us, right? Sorry for blurbing everything out, but okay, this is how you can help a rebel out. You have to help them attach it to their identity. So for example, if I want to, have a healthy like gut, what I need to do is stick with my eat, and I'm having a hard time sticking with my eating habits, or the movements or the exercises. I'm going to have to enroll myself into like a yoga training, or take cooking classes. if I attached myself to the identity and learning the skill, because at that point it becomes challenging for rebel, then they stick with it because they just need challenges in their life, period. The challenging part gets done for them. The expectation communication just doesn't work for them. So I hope this didn't confuse you and gave you some insights. But again, check out the show notes. I'm leaving the link where you can go and find out what your tendency is, what your partner's tendency is, what your child's tendency is, and have fun. Again, the whole purpose of this podcast and the whole purpose of this whole, the framework that author created is not to put us in a box. It's just for us to identify and move on. And how can we improve? It's about improvement. It's not about putting ourselves in, one and thinking that, oh, I'm doomed now. This is how I am. I don't meet this inner expectations, or I don't meet outer expectations. It's not about that. It's about, okay, identifying this is what my tendency is. This is how I can work around. This is how I can provide the growth environment to myself, to my child, to my partner, right? So whatever tendency you may be, knowing more about yourself can help you succeed in your work, your life, your relationship. So I want to share this little cheat sheet that I learned. And, I want to share with you just to keep in mind after you find the tendencies of yourself, your partner, your child, your boss, your coworker, your friend, whatever it is. Upholders want you to tell them what needs to be done, and they value self-reliance and performance. Questioners want you to justify what needs to be done because they value justification and purpose. Obligers want you to hold them accountable for what needs to be done because they value teamwork and duties. And rebels want you to let them decide what needs to be done because they value freedom and individuality. And so just as no one type is more successful, no one type is happier than another. And what does bring more happiness is understanding ourselves better, our kids better, our partner better, our coworkers better. So we can collaborate better, we can co-travel better, and we can live a healthier life.
That's it for this week's episode of Race to Rise. Be sure to sign up to our email list at risewithmittal.com and join us again next time for more wisdom about life, kids, and everything in between. I am Mittal Patel, wishing you happy raising and rising.